them for their meat, their tusks, their bones and fur, and so we helped drive these magnificent creatures to extinction. Of course, this animal here is probably the creature that has fascinated me most throughout my life over the last decade and a half. It's the largest bird that has ever lived. It is Aethiolus maximus, also known as the elephant bird. And the elephant bird lived on the island of Madagascar, where it was also endemic. And when I say it was the largest bird alive, I mean it stood over 3 meters tall, weighed more than half a ton, and of course it laid the largest eggs on the planet. In fact, its eggs were probably about this big. Of course, though it was a herbivore, so it probably browsed on trees in swampy marshland. And of course, back in the 1950s, when young David Attenborough made Zoo Quest, he actually went to Madagascar and put together a fully and reconstructed an elephant bird egg from a few fragments. And that's one thing that sparked my interest in this bird. But of course, no one's actually quite sure how they went extinct. I mean, it could have been a combination of climate change, where much of its habitat was turned into desert, or it could have been when humans arrived on the island. They cut down a lot of the swampy forests they browsed in. I mean, they might have hunted the elephant bird, but as we all know, modern day ostriches have a kick that's powerful enough to open a man's stomach, so I'm pretty sure that any kick from a fully grown elephant bird would have been powerful enough to probably kill someone outright. So I'm not sure if they hunted a fully grown elephant bird. I mean, they might have hunted a juvenile, because that could have been an easier target. Or it could have been that they stole and poached their eggs, which may have been a great source of nourishment. And of course, humans also brought with them things like chickens that carried diseases that the elephant bird had no immunity to. And it's believed that in the 1700s, the elephant bird disappeared from Madagascar forever. Of course, these ones here are the moas and the Haast's eagle of New Zealand. The moas were the tallest birds that ever lived. I mean, they stood about 3 meters tall, but they weren't bigger than the elephant bird, and they were found in New Zealand. And of course, the Maoris of New Zealand, when they arrived on the islands, unfortunately, they might have helped to drive both these birds to extinction, but I'll get to that in a minute. And the moas were herbivores, so they grazed and browsed on the vegetation. And of course, the Haast's eagle, also known as Harpagornis, which was the largest eagle that has ever lived. When I say largest, I mean it had a beak the size of a butcher's cleaver, talons as big as the claws of a tiger, and of course it had a massive wingspan, but not enormous, so it could dodge between trees. But we know that Haast's eagle preyed on moas because moa skeletons have been found with holes stabbed through their pelvic bones that exactly match the grasp of the eagle's claws. Now, of course, the Maoris of New Zealand, when they arrived, they cut down a lot of the forests these birds relied on, and they might have also hunted the moas for food, but also for resources. And of course, the Haast's eagle was heavily reliant on the moas for food, and when the moas died out, the Haast's eagle did as well. Of course, the Maoris made legends of these giant birds and the giant eagle, but Europeans dismissed them as mere myths until in 1939, when Professor Richard Owen, who was the curator of the Natural History Museum in London, managed to piece together a moa skeleton, and he he proved that that was no myth. And I think that skeleton is still at the museum today. Of course, the final animal is one that only went extinct nearly 100 years ago because of humans. This was the thylacine, or Tasmanian wolf. It was a marsupial, which is a mammal that grows the baby in a pouch on the mother's belly. And of course, they were native to Australia, and for millennia they were one of Australia's top predators and the largest carnivorous marsupial. But until about just over 200 years ago, when European settlers arrived in Australia with dogs, cats, foxes, badgers, weasels and livestock, as well as guns, and they decimated much of Australia's unique wildlife, including the Tasmanian wolf. In fact, this one was the last known animal that died in a zoo in Tasmania in 1936, finally spelling the end of that species and marking a new low in our relationship with the natural world. The reason why I'm showing you this PowerPoint is to show that we need to learn from our mistakes. Right here is like what we need. Why should we save the natural world? I mean, everything is all about balance. Of course, like in the oceans, if sharks disappear, because the oceanic whitetip has disappeared in about 75% of its range in the last 30 years. If sharks disappear, like tiger sharks, then sea turtles will overgraze the seagrass that is relied on by seahorses, manatees, dugongs, and of course help prevent global warming. If vultures in Africa and Asia are wiped out, then carcasses are just going to build up everywhere and spread diseases that will affect not only the wildlife but also the humans. And primates such as chimps, gorillas and orangutans are important not only to the ecosystems they live in but also to us as well, because they are proof that we were like them millennia ago, because they are our closest cousins, and we need to do something to protect them. But also elephants, if they disappear in the next 20 or 30 years, then the habitat formers that they are, well, they won't be able to form the habitats that they live in, and that will be disastrous for everything that lives there. But, yeah, as I probably haven't mentioned before, I've been working with and studying wildlife for a good part of my life, and it takes a lot to shock me and make me sick to my stomach. But just what people do to the natural world breaks my heart, and the fact that not everyone wants to protect it just tears my heart in two. And that's why I'm doing this, because we need to learn from our past mistakes. We need to do something about this now before it's too late. Yeah, I hope I've managed to get through to all of you, and if I have, then please drop a few comments and leave some feedback, but also share this with anyone who is willing to listen